You're listening to Bigfoot Society podcast, hosted by our captain, Jeremiah Byron, where it's all Bigfoot all the time. Have you ever had the urge to do more, to be more? Now you can by joining Bigfoot Society on the Patreon. Get ad-free episodes and even member-only episodes. Take part in movie night and even live video chats. Interact behind the scenes with Jeremiah and other Patreon members like me, Leia. The powerful podcast goes on, and you may contribute a verse in our Patreon community. Carpe diem. Seize the day, Bigfooters, and make your lives extraordinary.
Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Heather today. Heather's an individual from East Tennessee who reached out to me about some really interesting things that are going on down there that she's been experiencing. Heather, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeremiah. Thank you.
So we were talking a few minutes into the pre-show, and it sounds like this could get very interesting. I'm excited to hear it just because I'm always looking into East Tennessee. I'm friends with a lot of people down there, especially a good friend. We're talking about Harley Owens and how he's into all sorts of stuff down there.
Yeah, I can't wait to look into some of his stuff.
Oh, absolutely. But I would say, Heather, let's go ahead and take us to where we need to know all the details about where we're looking at and how this all started happening for you.
Okay, going back to even when I was a little kid, I was super interested in cryptids and the paranormal, and I didn't know much about anything until later on in life. As a teenager, we always grew up camping, and we had boats, so we were always boating, and we had a houseboat. We would take our houseboat out into the coves of Norris Lake here in East Tennessee. We would camp and hike and whatever. One thing that comes to my mind is taking our houseboat out on Norris Lake. We would park in coves. We would just pick a cove. We had our favorite cove, which was probably it was in the Anderson County type area. We would park out there for a long weekend. And one weekend we were parked, my dad and I, this is in the evening time. So my dad and I were fishing off of the front of the houseboat. We had two friends with us. The two friends and my sister were on the back of the boat. My dad and I were on the front. My mom had already gone to bed. So it was dark by this point. I was maybe 14-ish, 15 maybe years old. And all of a sudden, this big ball of blue, white, maybe the size of a softball, from my memory, came flying out of the woods. If you think about it, we're in the middle of basically nowhere. You might see a house here and there, but it's mostly wooded area. This big ball of light came flying and stopped and floated right in front of our houseboat. Dad and I were looking at each other. What is this? Oh my gosh. We're just looking at each other in shock. What could this possibly be? So by the time we got to look at it, and it almost seemed like it was looking at us, I don't know, it flew back off into the woods. And after that, we were like, oh my gosh, it could have been, what could it be? Like, is it extraterrestrial? Was it a fairy? What was it like? What could it have been? Going on throughout my life as an adult, I got into hiking and backpacking just to get away, for fitness, for exercise, stuff like that. My husband and I used to do a lot of hiking, backpacking. We still do. We don't backpack as much anymore just because, for obvious reasons, I've gotten into researching stuff that happens in the woods. I started researching the disappearances that happen in the Great Smoky Mountains where I live. I live 30, 40 minutes away from the Great Smoky Mountains. And we did a lot of hiking and backpacking. Ended up running into Dave Politis's and Scott Carpenter's, but so I'm getting off track here, but some of the hikes that we've been on, we went on a hike in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park to the Walker Sisters cabin, which is a really short hike. We're walking just up through there, and this has happened to us multiple times. We ended up hearing like a growl come from the left side of the trail, and we didn't experience the anything else except for the growl. We heard a growl. We thought, oh my gosh, it might be a bear, it might be an animal of some sort. So we stopped, we looked around, made sure we were safe, finished our hike, and went on about our business and got back to the trailhead. Moving on, one big situation that we had during a camping trip. Sorry, I'm stumbling on my words, but I'm just thinking. In 2018, my husband and I and our children, we have 2 teenage boys now, but in 2018 they were smaller. My sister-in-law had her kids who are now grown. We went to the Frozen Head State Park and we went camping. It was in the fall, I believe, and there weren't that many people camping at that time just because it was cold. This is one of the things that stick out in my head the most. Everything was going great. We went on a hike that goes up multiple waterfalls. That evening we did all of the normal things like having a campfire, cooking, and exploring the campground. We remember seeing maybe 2, 3 other campers because it was nearing the end of the season. But that night we went to bed around 3 a.m., I guess. We were woken up by the sound of boulders, like big rocks being thrown into the river, which was right next to our campsite. Huge boulders, just, you could tell they were huge because the splash was huge. The sound of the rocks hitting the bottom of the river, you could hear them hitting the rocks that were at the bottom. And then the sound of a dog barking. So we were too scared to get out of the tent. Of course, my sister-in-law, our tents were side by side. So we were like, did you hear that? Did you hear that? Are you awake? Are you awake? And of course, we're talking between the tents because we were tent camping at that time. And after everything calmed down and that sound went away and quit happening, which took a while, which we didn't know what was happening. We had no clue. Like maybe somebody was doing it. I know there are like wild hogs and stuff in that area, but in the next morning, my sister-in-law and we were walking up to the bathhouse and we ended up running into the owner of the dog. And she said, my dog never does that. We go hiking and camping all the time. My dog that was so outside of her character. We don't know what happened. And we told her about the boulders being thrown into the river. My sister-in-law and I did not have a clue. We thought somebody must have been doing it. We didn't think anything Bigfoot related. But as time went on, I started looking into it, like what could have that been? And I ended up running across, maybe it was the BFRO that did a story on Frozen Head. I can't remember exactly, but apparently and that's in Wartburg, Tennessee, near Petros, or however you pronounce it, where we're from, Petros. Apparently, there have been some Bigfoot sightings in that area, and I believe there was a hiker who found some Bigfoot footprints. I don't think they were casted, but anyway, that's one thing. And as we were on our way out the next day, out off of our camping trip, we were going under, which is like an overhang, like a rock overhang, and we started getting our car hit with these big blobs of slime, is what I would call it. And it looked like, hate to say it like this, but loogies on our windshield in the front of our car, which is unexplainable. I have no clue what that was. If it may not be Bigfoot related, or it may be, I have no clue, but seems a little strange considering after listening to your podcast, seems like Bigfoot's known for throwing rocks and boulders, just from the stories that I've heard.
Was it hard to clean that off your windshield?
Oh, yeah, it was. Like, it smeared. Like, we tried to use the windshield fluid and the wipers, and it just smeared it. And I do believe we pulled over at the nearest gas station that we found after we left that area, which is also near Brushy Mountain Penitentiary, which there's nothing out there until you get to the main road. Trying to clean that off of the front of our car, I have no clue what that was. Like, it was really strange. Yeah, it was difficult to clean that off. Don't know what it was, like just slime, like balls of what looked like mucus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it oily at all or anything like that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Once we ran the car through the car wash, I believe it came off okay because it didn't leave any type of residual on the car. It just seemed to be, it really did look like some huge person hawked a loogie and spit it on the car. I hate to say that. It's so vulgar, but that's what it seemed to be.
I would not be surprised at all because from what I've heard from different sources about Frozen Head, it's a really weird place and a lot of really strange things happen in there besides Bigfoot.
It is. And the vibe there is strange also. We had a great time, and we've been there maybe one other time, and we've done the waterfall hikes, and we had a really great time there with our family, but the vibe felt strange, I guess, that particular time that we were camping. But the boulders being thrown, and it lasted probably, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 minutes. We laid there and listened and just frozen, wondering why, who's doing this. There weren't that many people in the campground that night. So, yeah, I don't know. It was really strange, Jeremiah.
Yeah, that's one of those things. It doesn't really make sense. And if, let's say, if it was maybe a drunk person partying, then you probably would have heard people yelling at the same time or having a good time as they're throwing the rocks in there, right?
Yeah, we didn't hear anything like that. We didn't hear a lot of people. Like, we didn't hear people talking, really. It was very quiet at that time of the year because it was cold. We were cold. we were tent camping. We have a camper now. We've moved up just for comfort reasons, but at the time we were tent camping, and I do remember being kind of cold, and I do remember talking to one of the park rangers mentioning that they did have a hog problem, like a wild hog problem around the area. But at the next morning, my sister-in-law and I went over to the bank of the river to see if we could figure out where the rock, like the large rocks, were being displaced from. And we could not. Like, we never saw like indentations where large rocks used to be. We just couldn't see that they were being moved. There were large rocks along the bank, but none of them looked to be, I don't know where they came from. That's another weird thing, where they came from, actually. And if I had known now the things that I know, and she and I both, we've talked about it, we may have even tried to look for footprints of whatever may have been causing it, but we didn't know what to look for. We had no clue what could have been causing that at the time. So
it's a very strange place. I think I've also heard reports of like shadow people sightings or interactions, maybe even dogman stuff in that same area too. Just weirdness abounds for sure.
Yeah, I've definitely heard some things like that also. Didn't see anything like that, but I have nowadays that I've gotten into this. I went down the rabbit hole and started looking at videos, and I started out, I guess it was like, but like I said, Dave Pilatus, Scott Carpenter, Alex Petikoff, and I also stumbled across a lot of Jeff Meldrum's videos, which he's amazing. He's an amazing researcher. And I never thought that some of this stuff could have been attributed to the Bigfoot. But I'll move on. Besides the Frozen Head State Park and the boulders being thrown and the balls of slime. So in 2000, this was last year. This was like last April, May, late April, early May, and I can't remember exactly which. So this is in the Norris Lake area that we talked about before recording. This is in some Native American land. We camp at a campground, and we camp there quite often, normally in the springtime, early summer. It's in, like I said, Anderson County of Tennessee along Norris Lake. We also have a boat up there. So we take our camper and we camp, and we have our friends that camp along with us. They have teenage kids. We have teenage kids. So it was April, May. Sorry, I'm skipping up on my words because I'm thinking too much. We camp for the entire weekend, and it depends on if the kids are in school or not. But so one night it was like at twilight, we decided to take this trail that we noticed that doesn't have a lot of hikers on it, that goes up behind this campground. I don't really want to name the campground just because it's small and it's not particularly a state park or a national park, but has a campground, has a park, has hiking trails. So we camp there a lot and we hike there a lot. And so one evening, right as it was starting to get dark, we were curious. We wanted to walk up and see how far we could get before it got dark. It was me and my friend and our teenage children. We started to walk up And it's a steep incline that goes up to some boulders, maybe some limestone cliffs that overlook the lake. We went up, we got about halfway up, and so the weirdest thing that's ever happened to us, we heard all of the night sounds, the scurrying of little creatures. Then all of a sudden we walked into what I can only describe as a bubble, or like a void of silence where all of the sounds of nature stopped. And the pressure in my ears, everyone noticed it. We didn't hear anything else. So we all stopped and were reevaluating the situation, looking at each other. Okay, I automatically just didn't feel right. Like, I've always been intuitive, but I thought it was only when it came to like paranormal stuff or just natural feelings. And this was a natural feeling, but started hearing nothing. And there was a pressure like in my ears. So I'm looking at my children, I'm looking at everybody, like, my kids are bigger, but I'm looking at them being like, are they right here with me? So I'm scoping out what's going on. I'm looking into the woods, I'm looking back down the trail, I'm looking up the trail, and it just seemed darker in that area, very quiet, very heavy. And we started then hearing scuffling in the woods. So my oldest son, who's 16 now, he was 15 at the time, or 14 or 15 at the time, he got his phone out, started recording immediately, because we saw eye shine, or what we thought was eye shine, was probably eye shine. He started recording, and we were just standing around looking, scoping out. We kept walking a little bit, because even though I didn't want to go much further, we went a little bit further, and that bubble feeling, like that void feeling, didn't go away. I asked my friend, I was like, I told my friend, I was like, we don't need to go much further. I feel like something's wrong. Like, we need to go back. And she insisted we needed to, no, it's okay. We'll just keep going. We're almost there to the top. I didn't like the way it felt. My son didn't like the way it felt. He was recording, and I said, no, everybody, let's go back down. This doesn't feel comfortable. So we got all the way back down. As soon as we walked maybe another 100 feet, 200 feet, the bubble feeling lifted. It went away. I could hear again. They did say that they felt that way too, but I feel like when I described the bubble, the void, the silence, we saw eye shine, and it could have been deer, but we saw red eye shine. And we also, my oldest son and I said that we saw something that looked like a really tall black figure wearing a backpack, which might sound weird, but we saw a big, tall, dark figure wearing a backpack or something on its back. But we couldn't make out features, couldn't see facial features, you could see arms and legs maybe, but it didn't last very long. And when we got back out to the bottom of the trail, we booked it back to the camper and stayed there for the rest of the night. So my son pulled up the video that he had taken, and we saw like a shiny silvery figure walking from right to left in front of about a 3 or 4 foot stump. And it wasn't a whole lot taller than the stump, but it was shiny almost. It was like silvery. Also couldn't make out facial features. The video, and we slowed it down multiple times to try to see exactly what it may have been, but it had arms, legs, shoulders, a head, and it walked past a tree stump. And we also saw the red eye shine on the video. So we were like freaking out, really upset. Let's just forget about this and enjoy the rest of this evening, and let's not talk about this anymore type of thing. So we did, and that's what we did. We did talk about it a lot, and oh my gosh, what was it that we saw? What happened? How was that so weird? What was it that we saw on the video, which we didn't see with our naked eye, walking in front of that stump? Even though we could hear stuff walking like around us, even though all of the cricket sounds, the frog noises, the stuff that you hear in the normal night next to the lake, we just didn't hear anymore. So the next morning, we were like, let's look at that video again. The video was gone. It was completely gone off of his phone. Don't know where it went. He was like, I did not delete it. It just disappeared. Like, strangest thing. But we still don't know what it was that we saw. Of course, at that time, we attributed it to some sort of paranormal type thing, just because we didn't think a whole lot about Bigfoot, or if it could have been related to Bigfoot. We automatically thought paranormal type stuff, which I mean, I don't even know if maybe Bigfoot could be a part of the paranormal world. It could be, but I don't think anybody really knows. But it's interesting that that video somehow disappeared completely off of my son's phone without him deleting it. We saw it on the video that evening. My son and I, we've talked about it multiple times. And the thing that we saw with our naked eye, the tall, dark figure walking in the woods that we thought was wearing a backpack, which maybe it was really tall. I don't know, maybe 8, 9, 10 feet. We thought was wearing a backpack, and it just passed along the trail, and we got to get out of here. So that's when we've camped there again since, but I refused. We refused to go back up there. It was just that creepy. It was that weird. What was supposed to be just a evening hike up to the top to what's like a boulder field, or maybe a limestone cave type area, turned into let's go back, and I don't want to go back up there ever again type of thing. So I don't know. And that kind of took me down that whole rabbit hole of what was that? Like, so I started doing research online. What could it have been? So I started like getting online, looking at stuff like, what could it have been? Paranormal, was it? And then I started going down the Bigfoot rabbit hole. So now I'm listening to all of these videos on your podcast, on your channel, on YouTube, a few others. I think you're friends with Miguel from, is it Sasquatch?
Yeah, Miguel from Sasquatch Theory. Like, I have had him on the show, and, we've talked a bit. He's a good guy for sure. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so I've listened to some of his also. Just some of the things that I've heard just from all of, like, especially your channel, like the things that I hear these people talk about, I'm like, that sounds exactly like what we experience, like the void and the bubble and the weird silence and that feeling of dread and like you're being watched. Mm-hmm. And that you need to get out of there immediately. The last time, the very last thing, and this has been within the last year or so. Once I started getting into some of this like online research, trying to find confirmation of my own and to see what other people are saying. So my husband and I, like I told you in the email, we used to hike and backpack, and I don't anymore. Honestly, Jeremiah, I don't. Like, I'm too scared. We used to backpack. My best friend and I used to backpack and hike. We've got hundreds and hundreds of miles all over the Great Smoky Mountains. We've heard things that we couldn't explain, like never anything super serious. There was a time my friend and I were backpacking in like the Blount County area of the Great Smoky Mountains, and it was a short backpacking trip. It was maybe like a mile and a half back. We heard like these bird noises during the night, and I was like, that's not a bird that I know makes noises at night. So we laid there and listened for a little while, and nothing else weird happened. But it's just the little things that now I look back on. But like I said when I got off track, was the last thing was my husband and I took our camper up to Smokemont, which is near Cherokee, North Carolina, near the reservation, the Cherokee Indian Reservation. There's a campground up there. It was just us. It was our anniversary. We got away without the boys, and we were doing some kind of hiking around, and we always do this for some reason in the evening. We're hiking around in the evening, and we're doing this hike, and all of a sudden the same thing happened, that quiet, weird void. And I was up ahead of him a little ways, and I heard a growl, like a low baritone sounding growl, or what I thought was a growl. So I looked back at my husband to see what he was doing. Like, where are you? We were all just looking at the plants and what was around us, which we normally do. I looked back at him to see what he's looking at, and to see if he heard what I heard. And he looked at me with a look on his face. Let's go. He gave me the look, and he did the head nod, come here. So I walked back towards him up the trail, and I can't remember the name of the trail, but it was at Smokemont in that area. If anybody is familiar with that area, there's hiking trails and stuff like that around the area. When I got back to him, I said, "Did you hear that?" And he said, "Yes, I did." And I said, "Okay, let's just head back." So we started walking back towards where our camper was, and as we're walking along, we heard it again, and it happened. We already had that ominous feeling of something wasn't right. It was quiet in the woods. We heard it again, but it was like a low baritone growl sound, but it wasn't the type of sound that you could just hear. We felt it. We could feel the sound, and we couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from, whether it was coming from our right or our left or up ahead of us. It was coming from it was almost like it was just coming from the area. And it did feel like that deep rumbling, like you're standing next to a bass speaker, like at a concert or something like that. And I've heard so many people say that on your channel, that they feel like it's the vibration. And we felt that. We both felt that. And I wanted to run. He grabbed me by my shirt and by my arm, and he said, "Don't run. Don't. Let's just walk quickly, act like you didn't hear it, and let's just go." Because here in the Appalachian Mountains, if you heard it, no, you didn't. If you saw it, no, you didn't. You just keep on going, and you'd act like you didn't hear it. So that's what we did. And it was that feeling of just being watched, and like it felt like something could jump out at any moment and just snatch us up. Like, it was that scary of a moment. That was probably the scariest. It was way scarier than that moment up on that trail at Norris Lake. I don't think I've ever been that scared than I was that time at Smokemont. We made it back to the campground and we talked about it, but we felt like we had to be like hush, like we didn't want somebody else or whatever that was to hear us talking about it. And that's how scared we were. We went into our camper and we looked out the window of our camper all night long, I feel like, because we were so scared. It was probably the creepiest thing I've ever experienced. And then again, like I had started to dig into some of the Bigfoot type of stuff. And I did even mention to my husband, like, you think that could have been Bigfoot? And he's, I don't know. I have no clue. It was just unexplainable what we felt. And that feeling of don't run, act like you didn't hear it. Let's just go. And then try locking the door and keeping the windows up on the camper. But we were peeking out of the windows of our camper all night long. I feel like thinking that something was out there because it was so strange and so unexplainable. But I've heard people talk about that same feeling and that feeling of that bass standing next to a speaker feeling. And I never, until I listened to your podcast, I never heard people say stuff like that. But you could actually feel the energy or the bass or the something off of that growl or that groan. But we never saw anything. We didn't see anything. We didn't hear anything walking in the woods. We just heard that growl or that groan. But we were completely alone. We didn't see any other people because it was late in the day, twilight, evening hours. So we didn't see any other people until we got back to the campground. And then the mood lightened and we felt safe again. But I have no clue, Jeremiah. It was just some of the things that I felt and experienced. And I have the confirmation from like my children and my husband and my friend and her children. But at the same time, what prompted me to reach out to you was just to get your perspective and I know you have a lot of followers who have had probably some of the same experiences.
Absolutely.
Which
Yeah.
just intrigued. It's intriguing. And I guess I just wanted to see what you had to say. And I'm really interested in what your other followers have experienced, especially in my area, because in my area, I never thought that there were, of course, you hear the Appalachian tales of cryptids and whatnot. And of course, we have sightings. Other than the video that my son had on his phone, I've never seen anything with my eyes. I've never looked anything face to face. And I don't want to because I've had that scare of not wanting to go backpacking again and hiking. I used to hike by myself a lot and I don't at all anymore. I don't even think about doing it. I don't want to, but I guess I just thought reaching out to you might get your perspective on things. And also, like, I really enjoy hearing what your other followers have to say about what's going on in my area.
Yeah, absolutely. And both of those, especially the last few things that you shared. So like the Smokemont Campground in Cherokee, like that sounds to me like a classic infrasound experience. Mm-hmm. The way you experience it, especially where you can feel the sound and it feels like it's vibrating you're getting that fight or flight, and it sounded like personally you were like, I want to get out of here. And thankfully he was smart enough to be like, hey, don't go anywhere, because a lot of times that can even trigger like a predator response even more if they see something start to run, right? So
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I'm glad that he was level-headed enough to say, don't run, just be calm. But that was probably the most scared I've ever been. Jeremiah, it was nuts.
I do know that I just talked to an individual that's having things go on in Maggie Valley area of North Carolina, which is east of where you were talking about. But yeah, there's definitely like some wild Bigfoot activity down in that area, as you're aware. Yeah.
The mountains are so it's just so mountainous. The woods are very dense in a lot of the areas. We camp in Maggie Valley. That's one of our favorite spots is the Mile High Campground up above Maggie Valley. And it's actually on the Cherokee Indian Reservation, which the only thing we've ever heard up there were coyotes. And luckily we've not seen anything. I don't think I ever want to, Jeremiah. I don't think I want to see anything unless it's from a safe distance, like from a car, like something bounding across the road. I don't think I ever want to. It scares me to death to think that you could come across something. Just from some of the experiences that I've heard from some of your followers, oh my gosh, if I came across something, especially on some of my hiking trips that I had done by myself, I just don't know how I could react to something like that. It's just insane to think that some of those people, the hunters and the people just out hiking or whatever they're doing, come across something that huge and that unexplainable. Because in your mind, you don't think that could be real, even though it obviously is. I just can't bring myself to go on any more of those solo hikes or backcountry backpacking trips anymore, which kind of makes me sad that now that I know all of this stuff is scaring me away from doing those things that I used to love. But at the same time, I don't want to end up in one of those situations, which I don't know. And I don't think that in a lot of cases that they're mean or they're bad or that they're out to hurt people. It's just that shock factor of seeing something that you, in your mind, you know is real, but at the same time, you don't know that until you see it. I mean, I'm sure you hear that all the time, but
it is a thing, especially in your area. I would say you want to be so careful if you're going to be doing like solo hiking or out there. There's just so many stories and documented events of people going missing in that area. But the thing that you shared that I thought was really interesting is the whole like Norris Lake campground and how you described that. I've experienced that. Not walking into it, but I've experienced that like void of silence and like the pressure in your ears. And it is one of the most disconcerting things I've ever experienced. And that was out in Oregon, way out in the woods. But when I hear people talk about something like that, where you describe that, it's almost like it comes up when a lot of people are talking about potential portals which is very interesting, especially if you look at the area, and I don't want to get too wild, but there are certain podcasts out there that I'll just say, like the Confessionals really get into it. Tony Merkel, and he's based out there, but they talk about the alleged research that goes on in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And you've got allegedly some really interesting things going on there. And that's the most I'm really going to get into on my podcast. If you want to get more into that, people can check out the Confessionals, and Tony can tell you all about Eastern Tennessee and portals and stuff. He's good. He's good for that. But
the Confessionals. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Look at that. That when you say a like portal, yes. Oh my goodness. That is what we did mention that after it happened, because of the disappearances and stuff that happened in our area. that's a concern. Are they portals? Because I know there was that conspiracy that maybe Bigfoot was to blame for some of the disappearances in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And in my mind, I'm like, no way. I feel like for the most part in our area, I don't think that they're necessarily like aggressive or out to get anybody. I feel like in our area, they're just out here surviving. And I just don't see it being Bigfoot related, like the people disappearing. But at the same time, just like some of the other people on your channel talking about, maybe they're just trying to shoo you away from their living space. Like maybe they're just trying to get you out of their area, and they do certain things that we can't explain, like the infrasound or the growls and stuff like that. I can't even, I don't know enough to really even be able to articulate what I'm trying to tell you. But yeah, you know exactly what I'm trying to say. I don't know. I don't think that the ones in our area are necessarily aggressive, because you don't hear about them being aggressive. Even the accounts that I hear, like from Cott County and Newport and Blount County, just like with Scott Carpenter, they could have snatched him up and they didn't. Just like my friend, that he's an outdoorsman, he's an excavator, he does jobs all over the mountains, and he has his own things that he's told me. But he said the lady that told him about the little people, I don't know why she felt like she could confide in him and be like, oh yeah, by the way, while you're here doing work on my property, there's these little people. You might see them, you might not. And he was like, I believed her. He was like, she was a logical person. And I was like, you know what? That's really cool. So that's another rabbit hole I went down, Jeremiah. But I'm really grateful that you got back to me, because this has been a really neat opportunity for me to talk about some of the things that were weird that I've experienced, that my family and I have experienced, and compare them to a lot of the other people in my area on your podcast that have experienced a lot of the same things. I think it's super interesting and super confirming, which it's always, as a personal experience, you still can't rationalize, but there's something. And without seeing the being with my own eyes, which I haven't, except for in that video, still don't know what that was. Could be, like I said, it's hard to rationalize what it could be, but I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. It's super cool to be able to talk to you.
Oh, and I'm so glad you came on. I feel that there's going to be a lot of people that will be reaching out about things that happen in the Norris Lake, Anderson County area. I just have a feeling this will open up some really interesting things to come in the future, and hopefully, maybe we can even get you. I feel we were talking earlier. Check out the Bigfoot Reports and Data Facebook group. Harley Owens is a great researcher down there, and he is very involved with a lot of the places that you've been bringing up, and he's very knowledgeable about it too. So, but
I'm definitely going to check out I'm going to look him up probably as soon as we hang up, actually.
Absolutely. But Heather, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Please keep me in mind if anything else out of the ordinary comes up in the future. I'd love to talk to you at a later time as well.
I definitely will. Thank you so much, Jeremiah.
Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. or pass on my email. Here's the list. If you've had any encounters in Oregon, which I'm sure there's probably a few of you out there, please feel free to reach out immediately. You can use email bigfootsociety@gmail.com. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.